Hey everybody, I hope you're well. Stuart Bell here from Audere, and welcome to the latest edition of the Finnovator. Thanks to everybody for your feedback. I'm really loving it. I hope you're enjoying the content too. Well, this week I've got something that hopefully is just as enlightening, informative, and maybe even hugely practical to you. Greg Cook. I first met Greg many years ago when I was part of the FPA Sydney committee, I guess. And myself and Scott Andrews launched something called Finnovator, which was kind of an attempt to take, your staid, normal kind of financial services events and turn it into something different. We borrowed it from the tech world. And essentially it was this initiative where everybody would come along, they'd have a slide deck, 20 slides, 5 minutes to talk, and the slide deck would change every, 30 seconds. Sound about right? And they would have to freewheel it. And I think Greg was one of the people who just came along and totally owned it. He's a really interesting dude. He's one of these people who, as well as being a great advisor and runs a great business, has so much going on outside of just being what he does that he's got a very well-rounded life, and at times he makes it look really easy. I remember one of my first experiences, he shared with me, I think an advert he'd done for the CPA, where in front of the cameraman he had to pretend to be a drunk accountant. So it may even still be on YouTube, but that's the kind of guy Greg is. This issue of Finnovator is really where we dived into growth. Greg's been growing his business, started out with Eureka Acquisition, Eureka Whittaker McNaught, and around him he's created a really good team of people with him and Andrew Jones, and they built it really in smart ways. In this particular podcast, we actually went through the 4 phases that the business has gone through. We talked a lot about staff management. We talked about the challenges, what breaks when you get from one stage to another, and a whole bunch of other areas. I think if you are a practitioner who's looking to grow your business and you don't want to kind of break your back along the way, you don't want to run out of energy, and you want to understand kind of what you need to know when you get to the next stage or even the stage beyond that, Greg was just so full of information and answers. It was a real pleasure to work with him. I hope you enjoy it. As always, if something piques your interest, please feel free to reach out, either just to have a chat, or alternatively, if something we spoke about in terms of building your business and growing your business is something you think I could help with, just send me a message at stuart@audere.com.au. But in the meantime, hold tight. I hope you really enjoy this version. And here he is, Greg Cook. So Greg Cook, he is the head honcho of Eureka Whittaker McNaught. I first met Greg when I was part of the FPA. He was very helpful in getting something we were launching at the time, Elevate, which was kind of an informal FPA sort of event, and he was really supportive. I think he actually came and spoke at it. But since then, I've had the opportunity to work with Greg and his team, and I've just kind of noticed how he's one of these people who's not only been successful in business, and successful almost like in a way that seems effortless, but I know it's not. But also he's somebody who just gets the social side of it, the networking side, but more importantly, he's got a myriad of interests outside. And I'm always really interested in people who manage to combine running a successful business and still maintaining interest outside of it, because they're the people I want to learn from. So hopefully we're going to learn some great stuff today, because Greg is not only very generous with his time and very easy to approach and talk to, but also he's got some runs on the board. His interest in cricket. There you go. Got an analogy in. Good. Happy morning to you, sir.
No worries. Good.
How's it all going where you are?
Pretty good. Really hectic week. Although I was going to be overseas next week for a conference, and because of the coronavirus, that's been cancelled. So I feel like it's a blessing in disguise, because I've suddenly got a week where I can catch up on some stuff. So.
We were the same. We were going to take the kids to Vietnam. My youngest, Nate's never been on a plane, which is kind of the second child syndrome thing. But we were planning on doing Vietnam, and we've just gone nut. Doesn't matter how cheap the fares are going. So we just put the money we would have put into Vietnam to hiring a really nice house in Avoca. And I think, put it this way, I think the Australian tourism needs the boost after the bushfires. And yeah. How are you doing on toilet paper, just out of interest?
Yeah, no, that's pretty weird, isn't it? There's a bit of a running joke that I don't go to supermarkets very much, which is something I probably shouldn't share. But human beings are really surprisingly crazy sometimes.
Yeah, it just goes to show you, when people start reacting to people, weird stuff happens.
Yeah.
Mate, I know we've got 50 minutes of your time and you got to shoot off because you've got a rather important client meeting. So thank you so much for joining us. Mate, I'm really keen to get to the heart of the story, but I don't want to assume that everybody here knows you and what you do. So for those who maybe know about you or don't know anything, what do you do? Tell me about your business. Tell me about the people you help.
Yeah, so Eureka Whittaker McNaught. So I basically started the Eureka business with my father-in-law in the early 90s. I can talk about the growth phases later. Probably the biggest kick along was we took on the biggest chunk of Whittaker McNaught when it was broken up about 7 years ago. So that was a Queensland-based business. So
yep.
At that time, about 60% of our revenue was from Queensland and 40% from the old sort of Eureka business in Sydney.
Okay.
So I went up and lived there for a couple of years as we bedded that down because it's a really big thing for us. And we've done a couple of other acquisitions down here in Sydney. So we're sort of back to about 60% of our revenue being New South Wales. So got a team of 10 planners, including me, and a team of about 25. And we were the founding practice in Paul Barrett's AZNGA business that was launched about 5 years ago.
Lovely, yeah. A lot of I've worked with a few businesses that part of that, but it's an interesting exercise, and I hope it gets. Well, I know it is getting traction, but I think Australia needs kind of that kind of investment in advice practices. Like I think you've just come from a session with in the US, so you know a lot about high tower in the US and whatnot.
Yep.
So let's take it back to the beginning. How did you get into the industry? How did it all start?
Yeah, so look, late 80s, early 90s, I worked for 5 years as a sales engineer. So I sort of had a background in electronics, believe it or not, when I left school.
Wow.
And I sort of realised, I had some relationship skills and saw the guys that were in the sales team were the guys driving the company cars and so on. So I worked for Philips for 4 of those years, including in Perth, and Philips, the electronics company, but in their scientific, test and measurement equipment, calibration equipment, and so on. So my father-in-law was a Colonial Mutual lifey from the late 60s, and when business was really booming in the late 80s, he said to me, "Oh, you should come across. You'd fit in well." And then when the recession came along and we wanted to move back from Perth, I said, "Oh, well, look, I'd like to take you up on that." And he goes, "Well, that was a year or two ago. We're now sort of, it's tough times in our industry, and, I couldn't sort of employ you." And anyway, long story short, I said, "Well, I saved up some money, $15,000, I remember, which is probably about, 6 months living expenses, and went into it by myself for the first 12 months. And then when I started to get some traction, we formed Fegan Cook Proprietary Limited, which is actually the same business that's Eureka Whittaker McNaught these days. So that was when I was 24. So yeah,
24.
Yeah, it's funny. I've got a real cohort of guys and girls in my team now that are in their mid-20s, and it's I really enjoy sort of all the fresh skills and what have you that they have around our business. But yeah, like I know that's 30 years ago is a long time ago, but the industry was going through a crisis back then too. And I sort of managed to build a clientele from like orphan clients of old advisors that had left, or, fly by night sort of lifey guys, for want of a better expression. So
you're starting the business at 24. I want to talk about this a little bit, because 24 is relatively young to start a business. Well, how did that? I mean, did you just jump into it?
I probably, I don't know, like a lot of young people, I overestimated my ability. So I just, I'm a glass half full kind of person, and just sort of back myself. I always try to be sort of conscious of my shortcomings and try and sort of work on those. And like soon after I got in the business, I mean, I joined the FPA virtually straight away. I wanted to be strong technically, and I studied part-time and did the CFP as soon as I could in the sort of mid-90s. Because, I was conscious as relationship skills in our profession these days, but there's a lot of guys I came across that were incompetent really on the technical front. So the last thing I wanted to do was, do any damage to our clients. So, and I wanted to look after increasingly sophisticated clients, and I wanted to be, I kept sort of analysing, where are my shortcomings, or where could we be doing things better as a business, and where's where's the industry or the profession heading. And because, there's a lot of things in the 1990s about, commission disclosure and all customer advice records and all these sort of things, which seem very quaint nowadays, but they were their own challenge, 25 years ago.
Was it one-page statement of additional advice, the SOAA? Do you remember that?
Yeah. People, had connections over things like that.
I still believe that one day we'll eventually get down FSRA. I don't think we've done it yet, but we'll get there.
Yeah.
Tell me about that short. I'm interested in the analysis of the shortcoming, because that's something I find that people who achieve big things tend to constantly do. They don't pull themselves back. They don't dwell on their mistakes, but they'll look back and go, what can I get better at? Is there a process that you apply to do that?
I just try and sort of surround myself with people that have better skills in that area. I mean, I'm not the most polished public speaker, but I was really hopeless in the 90s. So I've worked over the years to try and improve those skills. And again, on the technical front, Andrew Jones is my fellow shareholder in the business these days. He joined me in 2002, and he's a CPA and came from a really strong technical background. And so, we've tried to, as we've taken the business from a small business to a mid-sized business, tried to make sure that I've tried to make sure that I've surrounded myself with people with complementary skills and people that I can learn from.
Perfect. So a big part of what I want to talk to you today is about the phases of growth. And when we chatted, the one thing you mentioned is you can put down the transformation of your business and its various guys. It's gone through 4 phases. So
Yep.
I think it'd be really useful, because to understand each phase, I think, and what the challenge was, what the mistakes potentially you made, and how you overcame it would be good. So if we break it down into sort of phases.
Okay, so I'll sort of start at the end, like the current renovation of our business that I'm in the middle of at the moment is Eureka Whittaker McNaught 4.0, EWM 4.0. That's the current strategy of the business. So, to answer your question, what was it 4.0? So 1.0 in my business's life is, that period from 1992 through to when I bought out my father-in-law, my regional business partner in 2000, and then Andrew Jones joined me. And at the time, it was the FSRA changes, the current licensing regime in the early 2000s. So that changeover was EWM or Eureka as it was then, 2.0. The third, and then, over the coming years, we had the global financial crisis, and, we all sort of learned some lessons there and some changes to our businesses. 3.0 for us was the Whittaker McNaught opportunity, which is 2013. And a lot of these things coincide with regulatory change. So there was the FOFA changes then, and that was the thing that sort of prompted the Commonwealth Bank to actually break up and sell off Whittaker McNaught. And look, that was really a tripling of size for our business. And I guess one of the reasons, though, we got the opportunity is we had a pretty strong business and a good reputation, I think, around the Commonwealth Bank. And I developed a relationship with Noel Whittaker himself. So that was one of the reasons that opportunity came our way. And now with, the Post-Royal Commission and the FASIA changes and so on have prompted the fourth era of our business. And I think we've been ahead of the curve, but we've also done a lot of tuck-in acquisitions along the way. And so what tends to happen is if you're acquiring a business of a retiring advisor, then sort of by definition, it's not necessarily the how can I put it, most sort of up-to-date sort of business. So you tend to sort of acquire, older trail commissions and asset-based fees and so on that you need to renovate. So it's sometimes a little bit of, 3 steps forward and 1 back sort of thing.
Okay. So can we jump into the first phase and do them sequentially?
Yeah. So
makes sense to work backwards. Which would you prefer?
Yeah, no, look, I suppose I covered that first phase a bit before with the intro, but I mean, the first 5 years I was basically a life insurance guy, a Colonial Mutual that I joined. went through its changes in the mid-90s and rebranding. I'm trying to remember the guy that demutualised it. He's I noticed he passed away a couple of years ago. Anyway, I can't quite recall, but big changes there. And we were when you look back on it now, we were obviously just a distribution for product. And yeah, look, I had a young family and big mortgage, and there was a lot of tough times there. I was sort of working hard, really hard. My wife was a nurse, a couple of shifts a week, and I can remember days when we used to have what we called duty rep in here at Martin Place, where you'd sort of get all the lead opportunities. I think the AMP called it floor day or whatever, and so I can remember having all these proposals to get finalised before I went into Martin Place at 8:30 a.m. And so I remember driving to my Chatswood office at like 4 a.m, working for a couple of hours, then getting on the train, coming in the city. And you sort of got all these leads during the day, and some of them you thought, well, gee, I'm just going to go out and see this guy tonight. So you'd sort of drive out to the western suburbs at night, and then you'd sort of get home. So, and then I'd pass the keys in the driveway to my wife, who'd take the car and go on. So yeah, anyway, we've all got sort of our hard luck stories, but you sort of put in the odd day like that where, and I remember there was a moment where I sort of inherited a client or an orphan client, and he really had a great business, and he had some interest in another business, and that guy I got on well with as well. It was like a really fertile patch of prospective clients, and then I landed that business and ended up doing corporate super work in that business, and I sort of remember going home one afternoon and the sun was shining and being out in the backyard and thinking, gee, I've got a future in financial planning, and that was probably about 5 years in. So.
Love it. So I meant to ask you, and I should have asked this earlier, but I'm going to ask it now. Was there a point, and maybe it's at this point, where you actually made a decision that you were going to build a big business as opposed to, just keep it tight, keep it profitable and all the rest of it? Yeah,
no, I've always wanted, if I'm going to do it, I want to have a red hot go and make it the biggest, sort of most successful thing I can. And I suppose when I look back, like my sort of parents were working class people. I grew up in a corner store. I always sort of had a bit of business acumen, and I can remember, like, another quick story. I when I actually started to make some money as a sales engineer for Philips, I went and bought myself the biggest jet ski you could buy, and I'd only been licensed for 2 weeks, and there was this World Jet Ski Championship at Bondi, and anyway, I got Philips to sponsor me, and I went in it, and actually managed to come sort of middle of the field in some of the races. So we're in the surf there at North Bondi. But yeah, I mentioned that because I straight away started thinking, well, I'm going to get it. I'm going to get into the jet ski business. Like, there's only one shop, and it's down all the way down the Shire at Caringbah. How would that work? And I remember starting to talk to business people about how a jet ski shop might work. And so, yeah, that was sort of when I was 19 years of age. I'm glad I didn't do it, but so yeah, I guess there's always been an entrepreneurial element to me.
I remember walking down with Rachel, but long before we married, this is early 2000, we were walking down Cockle Bay, and at the time there's a big nightclub base, and I just turned to her and said, you know what, I'm going to start my own nightclub. And she looked at me and went, no, you're not. That was the end of that. But yeah, oh man, I've had plans for coffee shops, startups. I think it's if you've got that bug, it's always interesting to have these.
Look, I won't bore you, but just in the space of 60 seconds, a quick story. My best mate came along for that World Jet Ski thing at Bondi, and a really big guy, and they had one of the sponsors was Gorilla Grip, the stuff you put on surfboards, and they had this big gorilla outfit, and and they got him to dress up in it, and he said he could ride, and he'd only just been practicing on mine, and it was a different type of jet ski, and he went out there in the surf, and he was out at the back of the breakers, and he came off, and could you imagine, like, head to toe in a gorilla outfit, like he came off in the surf, I would have drowned, and he managed to sort of crawl back on, but he couldn't stand back up, he was only on his knees, and the guy who was running the whole thing said to me, "Mate, I thought your mate could ride."
Oh, that's brilliant. Any photos, or it was?
Yeah, I've got a photo of me on the beach with the jet ski, but not my mate Roy in the gorilla suit.
Oh man, that was. I tell people I'm happy. I'm really happy I did all the stupid stuff in my life before Facebook, because there's no photo evidence. Just quickly, what was the thing you think that made that enabled you to skip out from phase one, which is presumably working your ass off, into phase two, which was the second phase of the business, which we'll talk about.
Yeah, I guess I had the courage, if you like, to buy out my original business partner, my father-in-law, because that it wasn't. It's sort of, sometimes with those situations you've got to sort of be a little bit active in making the process unfold.
Yep.
So. Yeah, and to be able to finance that, so that was a bit of a big call. We sort of actually did that deal in '98, and then he sort of worked on in a handover capacity through to 2000. And I guess the other thing was sort of realising that just being a sort of a cottage industry, just sort of one planner and a couple of support staff wasn't really going to be the future. And so, as you said in the intro, I've always tried to sort of network well around the industry, and it was great that I was introduced to Andrew Jones, who he'd been an accountant and then a paraplanner working for Prudential and Colonial. And he was new to planning. So I think I taught him a fair bit in the early years, but I also learnt a lot from him. And whilst the opportunity for the Whittaker Macnaught deal came along through sort of my connections, we wouldn't have been able to do it without his involvement and support, that's for sure.
And what was it? I mean, I think when you look at tech startups, they generally will not take sole founder startups. What was it about Andrew that really appealed to you? And specifically, how did you get that deal? I mean, what was the agreement? Was it a salary? Was it
Yeah, I don't think you'd mind me saying. I mean, we did a split on revenue, and we sort of came up with something that I actually had in the early '90s with Colonial, where we sort of agreed on a base wage, but that sort of went against a commission account.
Yep.
But in the early months that drives into the negative sort of thing. So, but I think I was reasonably generous with sort of the opportunity for equity in the business. But Andrew, earned every cent of it, and he was able to, some of the big clients I'd got on board, he was able to take things to the next level. And I mean, he's gone on to be one of the best self-managed super specialists in the country. Yeah,
it's good to know, because it can be sometimes hard, I find, to find that person. And then if you do find them, it's how do I, particularly if you're in an early stage of the business, how do you afford to bring them on board? So that's good to know.
No, I mean, you can't discount your luck as well. I mean, I sort of, it could have been introduced to the wrong person and made a wrong decision. And sometimes you just got to go on gut feel and run with it.
So I always think go on gut feel, but then do everything to disprove yourself. And if you can't do it, it's probably the right decision in the first place.
Yep.
Phase two, from 2000 onwards, I think you mentioned this is, so you got Andrew on board. You are now own the company. It's your beast, and you've broken through that initial phase. Tell us what phase two was all about.
Yeah, look, it was just more organic growth of the business.
Yep.
Yeah, and yeah, with listed companies, for example, I was just hearing the other day about one of the absolute indicators of a healthy business is strong organic growth. I mean, ultimately, you only grow in two ways: through acquisition, and that costs money, and growing organically costs money too. You've got to invest in the people and the marketing and what have you. So even in times where, at the moment, we're sort of discontinuing client relationships that aren't suitable for us, we're absolutely focused on organic growth in the business. Casting back sort of 15 years, we were always, I suppose, trying to use technology and product platforms and so on that were proven. You want to be on the leading edge, but not on the bleeding edge sort of thing, because as a small business, you can invest a lot of effort into things that don't go anywhere. Yeah. We were, as the terminology is, an aligned business. Colonial had been bought by the Commonwealth Bank, and we were licensed with Financial Wisdom. So I always tried to work really harmoniously with our licensee, and and professionally too, I took on some, I guess, leadership roles. I was on the Financial Wisdom Advisor Forum for 6 years and chaired it for 2 or 3 years, and got involved more in the FPA. And I've been, for example, on the Conduct Review Commission for the last 10 or so years, which is the disciplinary body within the FPA. So, right. I just kept, through conferences and an extra study. I went and did the life risk specialist subjects and the professionalism and ethics CFP1. When really there was no actual regulatory need to. I just wanted to continue to update and improve my skills. Also, I sort of, someone gave me the tip that if you want to market yourself and your business a bit better, you need to go out and win some awards. So I started to put effort into that, and we've been runners up and won various things both personally and as a business over the last 15 years to add credibility to the business.
What do you think about the way? Do you still think the award thing has changed in any way, shape, or form, or do you think it's still as relevant?
Yeah, no, it's. I guess most industries and professions, want to recognise, their successful and professional people. I was at the Barron's conference last week, so that's the weekly New York publication, and they do a 50 top advisors in Australia in partnership with the Australian newspaper, and I think that's going to be widened to 100. And part of their philosophy is, well, you hear a lot about the bottom 1%. Let's give you some news and profiles about the top 1%. And they acknowledge it's not a perfect science, although it's a fairly rigorous process they go through. So I've actually put that on my list of a list that I'd like to be part of over the next 12 months. So.
Love it. So at this phase, I'm interested in, we might not do it in the marketing, but it'd be interesting to hear about that if you get time. So your organic growth, investment in people and marketing, you're looking at technology and solutions going, you know what, that's interesting, but I need something that's going to work today. And you're sort of working within the constraints for licensee rather than trying to buck the trend or build something. What was the mistakes you made at this point which held you back, or what were the main things that you think you did well that enabled, outside of that enabled you to break through? Were there any key things that you want to point out to other people who may be in this space?
Look, like my involvement with other advisors through peer groups and also through my role on the Financial Wisdom Advisor Forum and the FPA groups that I was in, I was always trying to learn from successful peers. So that's probably one of the things I did right. There was mistakes we made, during the GFC. None of our clients were massively impacted, but like everybody, we sort of we took some lessons from that period. Yeah. Just thinking of things from a commercial point of view, our fees were all asset based, and so like everybody was sort of working twice as hard for less revenue during that period. Yeah. But we were always pretty sound in our processes and philosophy and investment approach, and so it didn't affect us unduly. I suppose you'd call my first acquisition was was my original business partner, Mike Feig, and then did another one during those 2000, early 2000s, and a guy by the name of Ian Evans. So sort of you learn, I've probably been involved in 6 or 7 or 8 acquisitions of various sizes in my time, maybe even more than that actually. And so it's good to learn some lessons in a small way rather than sort of learn big lessons in a big chunk. And I guess that put us in a position that when the opportunity came up with Whittaker Macnaught in 2013, that we knew at least a bit about what we needed to look out for, and some of the challenges that would be associated with a big acquisition like that.
A lot of people, I've seen businesses that dive into social media marketing and spend $3,000 a month on a consultant, and then 3 months later, they're basically starting to learn why that hasn't worked. So I think that rule of thumb is if you don't fully understand something, what's the way that you can do it in a small way, on the assumption that you're going to learn as you go, but you don't want to lose your pants along the way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Let's talk about phase 3. 3x size.
Yeah. So,
man, this is interesting.
Yeah. So, this was pretty big for us. I mean, if I can, I remember when we did that deal, every time I'd run into an advisor mate of mine, they'd say, can I use the expression, you've got balls doing that, because they realised that sort of it was tripling the size of our business and borrowing millions of dollars, personally guaranteed. But look, the business wasn't perfect, but we sort of managed to crack a deal where we had it was a pretty good multiple that we paid for, and there were certain sort of guarantees about clients that were opting out, and thankfully it came with some great people that many of which are still a part of our business and working out in our Brisbane office. Sally Bell, who's my general manager of advice, is probably, and she's now an equity holder in the business, and she's a real star, and she's effectively been working for Whittaker Macnaught for about 15 years now, most of her adult life.
I mean, you're coming into work, obviously it's not that sudden, you come into work the day before you've got a business that's like that. 3 months later, you've got a business that's like that. You've got staff you don't even know, or you're getting to know that you know them. How do you manage that? I mean, how do you basically manage that from a corporate point of view? Equally importantly, man, how do you manage that personally?
Yeah, no, that was a pretty hectic time. Actually, you sort of build a clientele that really sort of relies on you, and you think you can't delegate, sort of thing. One of the benefits of that was, like, I moved from Sydney to Brisbane, so we hired a guy to basically take on most of my client relationships in Sydney. So we're able to make that a fairly clean break. And I sort of took a leaf out of Noel Whittaker's book and said, well, I'm not actually going to look after clients now. Yeah, and I can talk a little bit about how that's changed in the last year or so. But Andrew Jones sometimes cynically says I'm the master delegator. So there's a lot of skills I don't have, and the last thing I want to do is play around in an area when there's somebody down the hall who's a lot better at it than me. So look, I just try and delegate anything that is not a good use of my time. Just talking about how much I used to joke at our peer groups that I only had one client, a particular sort of high profile client that I've got, but I actually did go through a period where really he was the only one I was looking after, because everyone had sort of been reallocated, and I was concentrating on M&A activity and also concentrating on running the business. But in the last 12 months, I've delegated more of the management of the business to Sally Bell, and I'm just starting my second guy through his professional year. So one of the things I've got a lot of reward out of over the years is sort of mentoring young people. I'm president of Linfield Cricket, and I enjoy doing it there on the cricket front, but also enjoy doing it professionally. So someone told me that apparently there's only actually 5 people around the country doing their professional year, and I've got 2 of them.
Wow.
Yeah. So and look, that's been a pretty heavy process, because licensees were new to it. So but I've really enjoyed that. So that's got me back in front of a lot of clients, being the supervisor for those guys, and yeah, just the current revenue changes that are going on across all our businesses. It's just made me to go back to one of my strengths, which is client work.
So let's talk about this, because I think it was Karen Way who said the biggest thing that holds a lot of business owners back is that they continue to think like technicians. In other words, the thing that holds advisors back from running great businesses is they can't take the advisor hat off and put the entrepreneur hat on. But you did 2 things that I'm really interested in. You handed over the relationships completely. And I reckon there's a few people who'd like to even hand over 50% of their relationships, which I imagine is a combination of the approach and the people. And the second thing, you got better at delegation, which a lot of people struggle with. Would you mind talking us through each of those in turn? The first being, how did you hand over those relationships and not have the feeling like you had to constantly jump in and train up the staff or deal with the clients either dropping off or not going down the right channels? Yeah,
look, fortunately, there weren't many that dropped off. And as I say, I had the advantage of the relocation, just moving interstate for good reason. So that really helped. And so it was a fairly brutal sort of changeover, if you like. And always sort of said, though, to clients, I'm here's my mobile. I mean, you can always talk to me as well, but it probably makes sense to take this up with your new advisor. And I mean, if you've got sort of competent people that you can trust, then trying to be the sort of center of the universe and sort of I got a big thing on alleviating key person dependency. Like some of the acquisitions I've done, there's a lot of key person dependency in the business that you're acquiring, and you sort of, if there's that much key person dependency, then what you're selling is not worth as much as what it would be if it was if it could be operated just as readily by another professional.
On that, again, this is a really another key point. I don't want to sort of, but you're obviously going and buying businesses that had key person dependency because you built the skill of coming in and removing that or addressing it. What do you think are the main causes that stop more advisors from removing that dependency? What do they not do? What do they not build? What do they not develop?
I don't know. In their psychology, they want to be needed, I think is one of the things. And I don't know, some of them I've seen, they just rely too heavily on the relationship part. So, it's great having a great professional relationship with your clients, but if your relationship is hinged on the fact that you enjoy having a beer with them or a cup of tea with them or whatever, but there's not a lot of actual tangible value that you're providing the client, then, handing over to somebody else can mean that in the client's mind, actually a lot of the value that they perceived is disappearing. So I think it's all part of the it's great I've often said, if you're seeing a heart surgeon, if he's got a nice bedside manner, but you also want him to be a good, competent at heart surgery. So,
which is the thing when you talk to a doctor, they come in, they'll have a chat, but there's that point where they go, so, let's get on with it. I'm a doctor. Tell me what you need. Yeah. We did the bridge climb recently, and I wrote a blog about it, but the voyage up the bridge was great. The guy who took us, Nick, he told jokes, he pointed things out, he was full of information, he was professional. But the point is that experience was not about him. It was actually about getting to the top of the bridge. So I think your value proposition has to be, you've got to be focused on the bridge, and then whatever happens in between, the relationship piece will solidify it. It will involve the relationship, but never lose sight of the fact it's about the summit.
Good analogy.
Master delegation. So many people struggle with that. What do you do differently?
I guess the first thing is recognizing, where your strengths are and where they're not. And so obviously, play to your strengths, find people to fill the gaps where you're not strong. Things like, calendar management and, all the day-to-day things. I've acquired businesses where, the planner was, that turn around and be doing the paraplanning for themselves. It reminds me of Dennis Denuto in that scene in the castle where, he speaks into the dictaphone for 5 minutes and then swings his chair around and starts listening to the playback and typing up. So, I don't know if you remember that scene.
It's true. It's yeah.
Yeah. So and as like our business has grown, obviously having people that are really fantastic at process. Sally Bell's created our using the pipe drive system, which is like a sort of version of Salesforce, if you like. So some of the guys and girls on this call will know Adam Coughlin, who passed away suddenly a week or two ago. Last Friday I was at his funeral, and there's a bunch of eulogies, but one of the quotes one of his colleagues said, one of Adam's quotes was, "Details are for losers." So, I mean, details, as we know, are very important, but, it was his way of saying, well, if we're launching this product or doing this and there's PDSs to be written or what have you, I'm going to get someone in who's much better and smarter at it than me to do it.
I think it's great. I've heard it articulated as, at some point in your journey as a business owner, you need to stop asking how and start asking who.
Yep.
I think it's the same sort of thing. It's like, just know what you need to do, but once you've got a basic idea, don't become the expert. Don't try and hone your skills. Can we talk a little about acquisitions? Just give us wisdom from the archives about what you've learned about how to do acquisitions, how not to do them, the common mistakes and traps. And, if somebody's in this current environment thinking about acquisition or scared of acquisition, what you would mentor them with.
Yeah, no, well, I think with all the FASIA change going on, there's going to be a stack of opportunities. So it's a matter of pricing those opportunities right. But as we know, it's not the price, whether it's, you paid maybe 15% more than you could have or whatever, is not going to be the make or break of the deal. It's having the relationship. And so, you can spend thousands of dollars on due diligence, and you should do that. But a lot of very successful acquisitions, the due diligence has gone on for a decade or two because of the relationship of the individuals. Then it's a matter of like really setting expectations and being mindful that, sometimes the business that you're acquiring, it's the first M&A deal that person has done, where it might be your third one or your 13th one or whatever. So, but you need to be really direct about setting expectations. And in more like a practical tip is, I've found just through an email thread, the email thread of the early stages of the discussions and acquisition is actually more important than the big legal document that comes out at the end, because when something crops up and someone says, well, I didn't know, this was going to happen 6 months in, or, well, are we going to close down the office the first year or the second year, or whatever the detail is. If you can go back and say, well, hang on, we actually broached this subject, very early in the piece, and this was my honest assessment of how things are likely to play out, and the way they have played out is within those bands and descriptions that I did set out. So it's sort of, because managing the handover and the transition is key to making it work and retaining the clients. And so, there's all the things about setting up the right sort of earn-out structure and terms, and making sure the client list is in the legal contract. And I mean, back to pricing, I mean, I don't think there's too many businesses that are even if they've got fantastic future-ready clientele, that are sort of worth anything like 3 times recurring. I mean, the prices have shrunk, and businesses that are full of trail commission are worthless now, in my view. The risk, it's of taking sort of those sort of clients on and then closing off those relationships or converting them is a very expensive thing in itself. So you're actually, even if you acquired clients like that or policy or account holders like that for free, you're still actually taking on a liability. And there's risk businesses are still worth a good multiple. You need to break up and segment the clientele into age brackets and size and so on. And actually, if you are using a multiple of recurring revenue, to use a different multiple based on all the all the different segments. But yeah, as we know, it's hard to look after clients for less than $3,000 or $4,000 a year these days. So if you've got hundreds of, you want 100 clients paying $5,000 a year per advisor, 500,000 plus of revenue. You can't have 500 clients paying $1,000 a year, because you'll go insane and you'll be a compliance risk.
Yeah. That's not a happy life. That's a painful life. Greg, I know you got to go. This has been incredibly useful. Thank you so much for sharing as usual.
Yep.
Let us know what's your view of the future. And no, in particular, if there's something that you maybe people, if they're interested in what you're doing, or they'd like to get, more about your approach. In other words, go for it.
There aren't too many businesses that are going through some kind of renovation at the moment. And, most of us have got exams and study in one degree or another. But I think the future of our profession is actually fantastic. I'm really looking forward to the next 5 or 10 years. We're going to be continuing to acquire business as well as growing organically. So if anyone on this webinar, knows some people that want to have a coffee with me or whatever, they're more than welcome to. And also, if I can be of any value to anyone's business, I'm happy to, whether it's having a chat over a coffee or, being on an advisory board and, setting up quarterly advisory boards. We had a really good structure the way we do it across the businesses at AZNGA. And, I always think about managing a business. There's 4 elements. There's the financial, there's the client engagement, there's the operations and the people, and the 5th element is how you run things for yourself personally. But yeah, always happy to help. I mean, I think one of the reasons I've had some success is deep down, whether it's clients or colleagues, I just like helping people and being of value and having great relationships with people. So happy to talk to anyone. Just give me a call or an email.
What's the best email to get you on? And I'll put it in the notes. Yeah,
so greg.cook@ewmac.com.au.
EWMAC. Sounds like it. Yeah. Greg, this has been awesome. I know you've got a meeting to go to. So any final words?
No, thanks for the opportunity. I enjoy doing these things. Thanks for your good work around the industry, Stuart. It was a few years ago now, but you came up to our Eureka Whittaker McNaught conference at Byron Bay, and we're a great part of that. So I can't recommend you more highly.
Thank you, if anyone asked me to come and spend 2 nights at the Byron to deliver a workshop, I'm like, yeah, I'm in.
That's my hometown, basically. I grew up in Lismore. And
is that right? Yeah. No wonder you're
probably where I retire as well. Hopefully that's a few years away yet.
Well, you're an entrepreneur. Generally, they don't retire. They just slowly, money.
Focus on the areas that they want.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much for your time. Greg, it's always a pleasure. Thanks for sharing. And mate, best of luck with the next 12 months and beyond. I know that 2 years from now, you guys are going to be ahead of the curve as usual. So enjoy it.
No worries. Thanks, Joe. Okay. Good stuff.
So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, another issue or edition, I should say, of the Finnovator done and dusted. I hope you're loving it. Just a reminder, if you are listening to this and you have a story to tell, you've built a great business, or you're a specialist in a certain area, or you're somebody who really knows their stuff and you fancy a chat, I'd love to connect with you. Ultimately, these kind of engagements are all the better when I can talk to interesting people who've got practical steps to share, and frankly, it's just a hell of a lot of fun to do them. Similarly, if some of the things you've heard you're interested in, please feel free to go and head to our website, audere.com.au. I know, it's a strange name. And check out our programs, check out our free content, and if it catches your attention, join our mailing list, and I will tell you about some of the free events, some of the regular webinars, and other stuff that we run on a regular basis. If you are a financial expert, financial planner, advisor, mortgage broker who is looking at the current situation and you're excited about it, but you just want to help to get through the current challenges. Other than that, I hope you're keeping safe. I'll be back next week with another edition of the Finnovator. But in the meantime, stay safe, and I'll see you soon.